Hello, my name is Rob Sweeney, and I want to talk to you today a little bit about some of the concepts I covered in a prior video about why people do what they do. In that video, I described a concept from William Glasser called the total behavior, which can be described in an analogy if you look at a car. Total behavior involves everything that we are. That is, our emotions, our physiology, our thinking, our actions. All four things can make up the tires of the car. So on the steering tires on the front, there are the things we think and the things that we do, that sort of behavior that I can measure, what I can see from the outside. And then in the back, in the drive wheels, this is a rear-wheel drive car, in the back wheels, we have the emotions and the physiology, what the body does in response to that behavior. And what Glasser described was every behavior we have involves all four of those things. So I'm sitting in the chair. I have to have sitting in the chair thoughts. I'm physically sitting in the chair. You can see me do it. You can measure whether I'm standing up or sitting down. So that's a sitting in the chair action. My body had to adjust to make that possible. It had to loosen certain muscles down here, tighten certain muscles up here, or else I'd fall over out of the chair. And I have sitting in the chair emotions. Now, they may not be strong emotions, but I have an emotion about this chair. It's harder than other chairs. It's softer than other chairs. It's stiffer. I have an emotional response. And the truth is, I have direct control over what I think about sitting down. I chose to do so. I wanted to do that instead of standing up. And the things that I do, I sat down. I didn't stand up. And while I'm sitting here, I'm talking to you. I have almost as much control over my body and my emotions. Think about that for a minute. If I have control over whether I sit in the chair or not, I have control about how I feel about sitting in that chair or not. That's kind of a different concept if we think about it from what we're mostly told in Western culture. We're told a lot about how our emotions make us do things. I had a passion that drove me to kill that person with an axe. It was an act of passion, right? I was so angry they made me do it. Well, the truth is, they didn't make you do anything. They didn't even make you feel that passion. The passion was an emotional response to what was going on that you chose in that moment, because in that moment to you, it made sense. It fit the rest of your behavior. It fit the thoughts you were thinking, the actions you were doing, and the way your body was responding. We can see that people have direct control over their bodies and their emotions if we look at those who specialize in that sort of thing. So think for a minute about Meryl Streep, an excellent actress, a person who deals with emotions on a daily basis. And we ask Meryl Streep to be sad. And we'll see right away that she looks sad and that she responds to us in a sad way. And if we ask her, she'll tell us she's feeling sad in that moment. She's learned to tap into those emotions directly through experience and training because it was helpful for her in that moment. And she learned that she has control over that. Ask that sad Meryl Streep to stop being sad and suddenly be angry. She could be angry just like that in a moment because she's had that experience. Think about Tibetan monks at the top of a mountaintop, spending all their days learning to control their bodies. These men and women have learned that if they sit and concentrate, they can literally change the temperature of their bodies, regardless of the environment around them. They can sit in the snow and make their bodies feel hot, raise their body temperature in the snow. Or they can sit in a fiery hot furnace and lower their body temperatures, regardless of the environment around them. They've learned to directly control parts of the body we normally think of as being completely beyond us. Things like heart rate, blood pressure, temperature, GI tract stuff, whether we poop or not. These are things they have extraordinarily control over because they've learned to train to control those things. Now, how do you train to do that kind of stuff? Well, you start with those things you have more control over. what you think and what you do. And the more you control the thinking and doing things to affect the emotions and the physiology in the way that you want, the more you learn that you can control those things directly. Now take that to what I would call the nth degree. Take that to the next logical conclusion. What does that mean? It means we have far more choice over the way we live our lives than most of us have been led to believe. We are not driven by our emotions. We are not suffering under what our body does. What our body does, the emotions that we feel, are as much part of what we choose in our lives as what we're thinking and what we're doing. And if we're going to respond to the world in a way that doesn't make sense, it's partially because in that moment, to us, it made sense. And we're allowing either someone else to make choices for us that we could rationally make, or we're making irrational choices on the basis of past experiences or future predictions that others would disagree with and is unhealthy for us. The truth is, and this is where William Glasser got the phrase reality therapy, the truth is we have far more control over ourselves and our lives than we allow people to understand. And we can create the best life possible if we understand that and put that to practice. In my prior video, the question was, why do people do what they do? Which I said at the time leads to the next question, well, how do I get people to do what I want them to do? Well, start with the first concept. You're not going to make anybody do anything, which is kind of an odd thought if you think about it. I can't make you do anything. What you do is a choice. What I can do is coerce you by making that choice either extremely uncomfortable or extremely pressing. I put some kind of pressure on you to make the choice right now, or I put some kind of ultimatum on there, either choose this or suffer that. If you continue to do this, I'll punish you in some way. Or if you stop doing this, I'll stop punishing you. I'll remove the bad experience so that you'll stop doing that. Those are all forms of coercion. And the fact is, given the opportunity, people will sometimes choose to take the hit. They'll take the punishment. They'll choose to defy you because whatever it was you were using to coerce them is no longer more important than what they're getting out of choosing something different. Which gets down to, well, why do people choose to do what they do? And when I was describing Glasser's total behavior, I said that he started out by saying everybody has the same basic psychological needs that drive the choices they make. They are love and belonging, fun and freedom, power and control, and what he said was survival. And I added the phrase purpose. So survival and purpose. Survival is the basic, we have to eat, breathe, move. We have to do those things necessary to survive. That's probably the most basic concept of that hierarchy of needs, which we talked about earlier. Was a gentleman named Maslow came up with this idea of a hierarchy of needs. There's some that are more important and they build on the others. But what Glasser described was the basic idea of survival, that most important bottom hierarchy of needs, is something people will sacrifice for other reasons. Think of the person who runs into a burning building to rescue a puppy. Why would he do that? Because in his mind, getting that puppy meets all of his needs in a way that meeting his needs for survival are not necessarily as important. If he's a fireman, he's part of a group, and he has defined himself as a great fireman. Firemen save things. If he's a fireman part of a group, saving that puppy reinforces his belonging in the group in his head. They will love me if I bring out that puppy. I will belong to the group if I prove to them I'm a great fireman and I run into that burning building, I cannot speak. If I run into that burning building and I rescue that puppy. It's actually kind of fun to defy the odds, to take the chance, to risk something, to run into that burning building and survive would be a fun experience. And to choose whether to do that or not gives me a level of freedom and control that I don't have otherwise. The chief says don't go, but I choose to go. That means I have control, not him. I have the freedom to decide. So I'm fulfilling that need for freedom and power and control. I made that choice. I also, in my mind, as the person running into the building to rescue a puppy, believe that I am stronger than the fire, or else I wouldn't take that chance. If I believed I was going to die and the puppy would die with me, why would I run in there? But if I believed I could beat the fire, I could beat the odds, I was more powerful than, I would potentially take the chance, and I would risk my survival in doing so. Having met all those needs and meeting that definition of myself as the fireman running into the building, I have met my purpose. I have a reason to be at the fire, and I have completed that purpose by trying to rescue the puppy. So you can see how some things can be sacrificed for others on the basis of meeting those psychological needs. And the key for Glasser was that it's not necessarily whether you actually meet the need as much as it is whether you believe you will. It's about prediction. It's about thought and concepts, about the idea of, not the actual experience of. So survival for him was less a matter of actually eating, drinking, and breathing, but believing that we will eat, drink, and breathe in order to survive. That was part of that basic psychological need. So that's why people do what they do. How do I get people to do what I want? First of all, you recognize that everybody has a choice, and you're giving them choices to make. You can coerce them, but that's only limited. You're better off getting them to choose to do the things you need them to choose to do. And how do we do that? Glasser described nearly all experience as a relationship with other people, and all unhappiness as the core of psychological problems. And so he said the basic, most important thing in getting people to do what you need them to do was to create a relationship where you do things together that meet both your sets of needs in a way that makes sense, that is responsible. He devised a set of 7 deadly habits and 7 caring habits for creating a good relationship. The caring habits include supporting, encouraging, listening, accepting, trusting, respecting, and negotiation. Doesn't that sound like trauma-informed care? And the kinds of things he said most people use instead, mostly out of experience with other people who did it, or a lack of thought about what would make more sense, or sometimes it's successful. Things like criticizing, blaming, complaining and nagging, threatening, punishing, or bribing. When we talked about levels of development for person's morality, one of the things we said was that when you're a child, you use the behaviors you use to avoid a punishment, and then you move on to use the behaviors you use to get a reward. And then third level was the behaviors you use are to create a relationship with your parents and sort of define who you are as a good person or a bad person. And the next level is being a person within a social structure, knowing what the rules are, how they're defined, how they're enforced. Finally, you move on to the level where you do what's right because it's right. Well, you can see these stages of development and morality in the way Glasser describes relationships. If I'm a person who is in a good relationship and I'm being supportive and offering choice and I'm negotiating things, I'm encouraging that person to be empowered, then I'm dealing with that person at a level of doing what's right because it's the right thing to do. I'm neither punishing nor bribing. It's not about whether they're a good person or a bad person. It's about whether it's the right thing to do. And you can see his deadly habits in the way those levels of morality kind of develop, right? If we believe that all people are kind of stuck in that childish level of I do what I do to avoid a punishment, then we're going to continue to try to punish people as they get older, in spite of the fact that that no longer works. That's no longer why they do what they do. It's no longer how I get them to do what they do. Eventually, they're going to take the punishment because they're stronger than what the punishment is, or it doesn't mean anything to them. One of the most important jobs we have in our culture in America that deals with people and getting them to do what you need them to do is the police. And so one of the things they're trained in is what they call verbal judo. And in verbal judo, the idea is that you have to use basic concepts about human psychology and human behavior to create a safe environment and to get people to comply in that moment of crisis when they're not necessarily thinking. But one of the things they start with in verbal judo is the idea that everybody has a very predictable sort of universal desire for how they want a relationship to go. This includes with strangers as well as loved ones. And what they would say is all that people want to be treated with dignity and respect. They want to be treated as if they're someone of value and they have some dignity, whether it's a policeman talking to them or their mother. All people want to be asked rather than told what to do. And all people want to be told why they're being asked to do that thing. So even in a police circumstance, they're trained that before you say, I need you to get out of the car and let it drop at that, they're trained that what they should do is start with, in a respectful, dignified way, ask, would you please get out of the car? I need you to step over here away from the controls. So they understand why, and they're being asked in a responsible, respectful way. That's what most people want. People also want to be given options rather than just one thing to do. And finally, people want a second chance. When they've made a mistake and they understand what's wrong, they want another chance to do what's right. They want to build a relationship with you, stranger or mother or loved one. They want that opportunity to try again. And again, this is what the police are being taught as a way of dealing with other folks in their most dire, crisis-laden times. Makes sense, right? Now, I'm always asked, how does this stuff sort of relate to the kinds of things we see in the movies, the boot camp experience? The guy gets off the bus and the first thing happens is the drill sergeant jumps up into his face and starts screaming and yelling. And then that makes them do what they need to do. Is that kid demonstrating choice? Is that drill sergeant empowering that kid? And the answer is, well, no. But that drill sergeant is also not creating the kind of do what I do or else environment that it seems to be. What they're doing is they're creating a very uncomfortable place to be by yelling in that person's face and getting very, very close until that person complies. You'll see that the drill sergeant respects that person's ability to do those things he's demanding of him. There are one or two things he's demanding. He's demanding it right now. It must be complied with. You must do this. And when that happens, he stops. So he's using a kind of Skinnerian training where he's creating an uncomfortable environment, and when the person does what you need them to do, you remove the discomfort. It's not necessarily a reward, but it's also not a punishment. This is a kind of coercion, but it's also a kind of training of reflexes. The more often this person is told, stand in this line at attention, at first with a very uncomfortable, in-your-face, loud kind of demeanor, and later on, as the person learns to do that automatically when he's told to, less and less discomfort. You're training the body to respond to those kinds of commands with a reflex without that person having to think. So that later on, when that same drill sergeant has to teach that person very complex ideas about loyalty, about respect, about teamwork, about how to move forward under fire, about very difficult, life-threatening, terrible things, those very simple concepts that require compliance, stand in a line, at attention, and listen, don't have to be trained in a very complex way. That's done. He's gone through those first steps. It also works as a kind of filter for that military experience. Those people who cannot comply, those people who cannot understand, who cannot take part in that experience are washed out. Because if they can't learn that way, it takes too long and it's more difficult to teach them than the Army has time and resources to use for that particular kind of person. Doesn't mean they can't be good in some other way, but it means that in that particular instance, with that particular kind of experience, it's not for them. And so this is a way of filtering people out. So does that go against what we were saying earlier about meeting needs? No, because in that opportunity of getting off the bus, when that drill sergeant is getting in those kids' faces to stand on a line at attention, not talk and listen, those who cannot are choosing not to. They're choosing to have that person continue to yell in their face and not comply until they're washed out. And they're not going to learn those more advanced things. The sergeant is not going to use those same kinds of techniques to teach because they don't belong. They haven't learned to comply with their orders in the moment when they needed to, when they were uncomfortable and things were strange, and they're just learning. So how do we get people to do what we need them to do? First of all, we have to be very clear about what we need them to do. Is this a complex thing that requires collaboration and negotiation? Is this a very simple thing where we require compliance? Is this something that they actually need to do, or can we do with them or instead of them? And then we need to determine based on that how we're going to ask them, encourage them, empower them, or demand those things that we need in compliance, and then move on to do the encouragement and the collaboration and the negotiation, those things that we can do once that compliance is in place.